Just wanted to take a quick moment and talk about who we trust for our information these days. There's so much lack of trust. There's so much subterfuge going on. There's so much, just, so many things going on behind the scenes that it's really hard. People are afraid. And so, of course, typically we fall into line and trust our authority figures. But time and time again throughout the last 4 decades, we've seen they're not always honest with us. They're not always telling us the information in the most concise and accurate way. A lot of them have hidden agendas, of course. So where do you get your information from? I was just thinking about this, like the whole fake news with Russia and how Russia has been, hijacking Facebook and social media to promote their message. Well, that same thing happens with all powerful organizations. Don't think just because it's one rogue country doing this successful tactic that other syndicates aren't doing it as well, like large corporations as an example. So, and also don't think that, for example, the US isn't doing this to undermine the political process in other nations. Of course, Chomsky has written about this for 5 decades now, right? But as far as like what's going on today, how do we know what's really the truth, right? It seems to be so many conflicting messages, and people get fearful. Their brains get hijacked by emotion, and we start to go down that conspiracy wormhole in a sense, where things get so outlandish that everything is a conspiracy, which is one group of people. On the other side, of course, are the stalwarts that believe our trusted authorities are always telling us the truth, and everything that is not the official story should not be believed. And it's maybe somewhere in the middle, right? Maybe it's not the woo woo on the one side and the poo poo that are poo pooing everything on the other side. You kind of have to look at, one of my acquaintances is a federal court qualified expert witness on conspiracy theory, and he's a New York Times bestselling author, and he's talked about this at length for decades now. And what he would say is that each issue needs to be looked at for the evidence. And even when it comes to like the science behind viral infections and how all this stuff happens and what drugs or what natural agents work, look at the evidence, right? But with that analysis of the evidence, you also need to understand the financial and political biases that influence that evidence, of course, right? I mean, so many people on the dismissing everything but the official story side, right? The poo-poos, they will say that, science has settled this issue. But you need to look at that in the context of, well, are these scientists paid off? We looked at, for example, cholesterol lowering medications, antidepressants. And in both of those instances, you see how drug companies can selectively publish data that shows support for their pharmaceuticals, right? So there's a bias there that really skews the truth. And also you see how, the studies themselves can be confounded by financial interests. And so it's really hard. Even science, in a sense, has sold out to the extent that in certain areas it really can't be totally trusted anymore. So, big corporations, you have this issue also of the fact that they can go after people. Like when Celebrex and Vioxx were hurting thousands of people and these drug companies knew it was happening, they actually were targeting physicians that were speaking up against them. So there's always this attack money. Follow the money trail for sure, because whoever has the most money typically is probably the most prone to corruption and scandal. And you look at that with Merck, with Vioxx and Celebrex, of course. Then you also have the same similar phenomenon with these slaps, right? Like Erin Brockovich made famous, where she began to uncover the polluting companies were killing people, and in essence, they were doing a strategic lawsuit against the public. They hire these big law firms, they go after people, and they bury them in a way that, the issue never gets brought to the limelight, the mainstream media. So this happens over and over again. There's a great movie that just came out last year called Dark Waters that really showcases this with DuPont and Teflon, and how they, in a sense, really intentionally poisoned both their workers and the American public in the name of profits. So when you have an issue, you have to look at that. I think even with this issue now of Bill Gates and what his agenda is, there's enough evidence out there, even in mainstream publications like The Nation, that calls into question his morals and his ethics. He may not be the compassionate philanthropist everybody thinks about, especially given his history of denying low-cost medications for HIV positive Africans, people in Africa that could have benefited from generic drugs. Bill Gates was part of the push for, pharmaceutical patented drugs, and that's been estimated to have led to the death of 330,000 HIV positive people. He also pushed for food relief in Africa, only using GMO crops, and that also, in a sense, is pro big corporation. A lot of his philanthropic donations are to pharmaceutical companies working on vaccines that he's also a part of. So it seems like he has an agenda there, even with his compassionate giving through his trust or his foundation, his tax evasion strategies, illegal of course, but still his tax strategies have saved him more money than he's given away. And so you have to call into question, if he's such a caring person, why would he want to be doing that?